Welcome to 60Skills. And the topic of today's lecture is the role of the planets in meditation. All right, now depending upon the system that you're working with, most systems end up working with at least some of the planets for meditative purposes, the most common being the sun and the moon. In addition to this, you can also categorize different entities, or spirits if you will, by their planet of origin or planet of influence. Now this varies quite a great deal depending upon what you're working on and what system that is being utilized. That said, typically speaking, there are two approaches to using the planets in meditation. One, in classical Western Hermetics, you refer to the intelligences of a planet. These are the entities involved with that planet. When engaging with the intelligences, you are normally doing this from the standpoint of looking for information. Now again, why a spirit is associated with a given planet is a bit of a discussion and really beyond what we're going to get into in this video. That said, simply keep in mind that some spirits tend to congregate around the energies of a given planet. Now, when approaching the intelligences of a planet, most people again do this for the sake of learning things. If your clairvoyant, clairaudient, and mental wandering skills are properly developed, you can travel with your consciousness to these places, engage these spirits, and learn things from them. Additionally, you can engage in acts of evocation, which is the summoning and binding of spirits into the physical world. This is a major area of study in a lot of traditional forms of meditative exploit, particularly Hermetics, and particularly the grimoire tradition in Western Europe. Now, that being said, there are other ways of working with the planets that go beyond merely working with the intelligences to gain information. You can invoke or work with the spirit of a planet. In this case, you are talking about the power aspect of the planet. Now keep in mind, as supermassive orbs moving around at incredible velocities through space, directly bringing the spirit or power aspect of a planet into your body to a high degree can literally rip your subtle bodies apart. This is something you have to be very careful with. That said, there are ways of working with the spirit of the planet that can be highly valuable. For example, in traditional planetary work in Hermetics, the moon, for example, has a huge effect upon your astral body. It greatly strengthens your astral field and makes it much larger. Additionally, working with the near-Earth zone generates quite a bit of vital energy in your body as well, in the vital body. Working with Mercury generates a great deal of mental energy. The sun is also notorious for generating a lot of vital energy as well through the act of purification, which makes sense because everything that is alive on the planet has at least something to do with the sun in the terms of the generation of the energy it uses to exist. Additionally, Saturn tends to work a lot with Akasha, and in this regard it can actually be quite dangerous. So on and so on and so on. So as you can see, when working with the planets in meditation, you have both the intelligence or information aspect of that activity and the spirit or energetic aspect of that activity. All right, let's talk about some different ways we can work with extraplanetary bodies. One way to work with these things is to work also with the constellations. The constellations generally have a mental aspect to them. So in one regard, what you can do is you can place the constellations in your mental field, one of the planets in your astral field, and an associated Kabbalistic letter into your vital field. Another way of doing this is you can work with a series of planets. So you could put the sun, for example, in the energetic field above your head, Mercury into the energetic field associated with your head, thereby growing your mental body or mental energy. Something like the moon or Luna into your astral field in order to grow your astral body, because that's its natural connection. And then the near-Earth zone into your vital field to grow that kind of energy. and then run another energy overlaying that. This is another way you can do this. Now, all of these are considered fairly advanced techniques. That said, a lot of systems start their practitioners out early on working with sun and moon meditation. Why? Well, the sun is very solar. It is the most electric of the planets. And in terms of the planets in the inner part of the solar system, that is, out to the classical planet of Saturn, and I'll get to the outer planets of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in a moment. The moon also represents the most magnetic or water-oriented aspect of the inner planets. Therefore, if you only work with the sun and the moon, you have a balanced working relationship. Now, also keep in mind that you need to counterbalance when working with planets. What does this mean? So if you're using a very electric planet, like, say, the sun, you want to counterbalance with the moon. That astral aspect of the moon drowns that solar energy out when you're done practicing, and it keeps it from continuing to burn you. In general, you want to use the moon to sync the energy of all of the other planets. There are a couple of notable exceptions, one of which is Venus. You're going to want to counterbalance that with solar energy, and then finally empty it out using, again, lunar energy. If you're dealing with something like Saturn, which I don't recommend for many people, but is a thing that you can do with enough training, Saturn has to be counterbalanced with solar energy. And then at the end of that, finishing it off to sync everything using, once again, lunar energy. When you get to the outer planets, you also have some of these relationships. For example, Uranus results in a further refinement of your mental body or mental field. So in this regard, it is also related to Mercury. Neptune results in a further refinement of your astral field, and it also has a relationship to both Venus and the moon. Pluto, on the other hand, results in a further refinement of your vital field, and it also has a relationship with both Saturn and Mars. So you can see how the need to counterbalance can become quite complicated depending upon what you're working with. Now, there is one final aspect of working with the planets that bears mention and that people should pay very close attention to. First, anytime you generate one of the energies of the planets, you risk, or typically not risk, but in fact generate attention from the spirits associated with that planetary realm. Spirit magic is tricky because these things definitely modify the way you think and the way you behave when you work with them. And their more subtle effects are the harder ones to keep track of. For this reason, if you do not already have access to your own Akasha and non-dual light, working with the power or intelligences of a planet can be quite risky. And the reason for this is very simple. These things are looking to assert themselves in our world for any variety of reasons. Some good, some bad, mostly they just don't care. However, if you don't have access to your own Akasha, your ability to send these entities away at will is highly limited. And because these things, generally speaking, don't have bodies and don't have breath, they can simply heckle a sensitive practitioner 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, until the person simply starts doing whatever they want. This is not a very good deal. On the other hand, if you have access to your own Akasha, you can dissolve that connection and, more importantly, dissolve the subtle body of that entity as it manifests in this world and send it back home. So when you have access to your own Akasha, entities tend to be very respectful. Additionally, when you have access to your own non-dual light, when the entity observes you, instead of reflecting off of all of your good or bad habits and generating an appropriate form relative to that, it tends to see more of your higher self. And so the version of the entity you get tends to be a higher entity. Now keep in mind, there are truly negative entities out there, and regardless of what anyone else says, there is literally no reason to work with these at all. It's not good for you, and it's not good for the people around you. So, that said, this is a brief rundown on working with the planets in meditation. Simply put, there is the intelligences or information side of the equation, and there's the spirit or the power side of the equation. There is a definite need to counterbalance these energies depending upon what you're working upon, and some of the planets have specific effects upon your various subtle bodies, some of which are well understood, some not so much. And finally, to do any of this work, you should definitely have access to your own Akasha for your personal safety and the ability to control the interaction, and your own non-dual light, so that the version of the entity you're dealing with tends to be its higher form. If you enjoyed today's lecture, please hit the subscribe button down below and give us a like. And if you would like to learn more about the 60 Skills curriculum, check out the links in the details below the video. Have a good day and be well.